This episode is brought to you by Bulletproof Script Coverage, where screenwriters go to get their scripts read by top Hollywood professionals. Learn more at covermyscreenplay.com. And with Dracula was that first film. I remember seeing Dracula in the theater opening, and it was a huge opening. I remember it was because
it saved Francis's life and set records. Nobody could believe how big it opened.
It was, if I remember correctly, one of the best trailers I had ever seen.
Sid Ganis.
Oh my God! What a trailer editor! I mean, because that trailer sold the movie so beautifully.
Yeah.
And the way Francis went about it with this whole old kind of like turn of the century style filmmaking and using older technologies and reversing the film, and it was just so rich, and the transitions and how he was able to do it. But you were telling me a story before we started recording that Francis made a phone call to you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
When Dracula sets were being built, when Hook was coming down, so it was kind of a heady time for me. But we were deep in post-production and had a release date right around Halloween in 1992. And Francis had been in the editing room nonstop, and we'd had 2 or 3 disastrous previews. I mean, just disastrous. And I watched this courageous man go, oh, well, it's another rewrite. Let's go back, and just the studio is panicking, and they're wanting to shut it down and come and take over and what have you. So it was about late summer. We're opening in October. Mid to summer, I get a phone call at midnight in New York from Francis, and when Mr. Coppola calls, you wake up, and he said, well, okay, Jim, I want you to get on a plane in the morning and come out here as fast as you can. He said, I hate the film, I hate the script, I hate you, I hate the fact you ever wrote it, I hate the actors, I hate the studio, I hate the whole idea that I ever got involved in this piece of shit. I want to show you that movie.
Wow.
So
great sales pitch.
Yay! I can't wait. So the next night I'm there, and I'm in San Francisco, and I to Judy, I don't know how long I'm gone. I don't know what's happening. I don't know if this is a day trip, if I'm being fired, if the movie's, I don't know what's happening. So the next evening, I'm down in the Godfather screening room there at Zoetrope, as Francis called the Bohemian Amblin. The big Godfather couches and cigars and wine and liquor, and 2 women that spoke Romanian. I don't know why they were there, but there were these 2 women. I think they were, bite my throat or something.
Right.
And Francis didn't even come down. He called me from the penthouse. Okay, good, you're here, you're fine, okay, all right. Said, I want you to call me after you screen the movie, and I'll come down and we'll talk. This is about 10 o'clock at night. So by 10:30, I'm drunk. By the time the film is over, I'm so angry. I'm so pissed. I mean, he was right. He was a piece of shit.
Wow.
And I had been to all the dailies. We rehearsed. We did this incredible prep that he learned from him. All the prep he did.
I saw. Yeah.
All, the storyboards that we did, the screenplay was lauded by the actors. There wasn't a bunch of people saying this sucks, throw it out. They wanted to add more. And I'm going, how did this happen? So then Francis comes down in his dapper, we're smoking robe and a cravat and stuff, little pointed Turkish shoes, and all happy, and said, you didn't call me. I said, yeah, I hate you too. I hate it too. So he said, let me tell you, like a big kid, let me tell you the film we're going to make. And I'm going, didn't we just make this movie? And he pitched me what I thought we'd shot. But what I began to recognize is that during the shooting, we sat in the next 2 weeks and went through every footage, all the footage we had, and went through the existing cut. And we began to identify pieces of narrative that the film needed. Not whole scenes to be reshot, but pieces, transitions, piece of narration, an insert here, And I kept saying to Francis, there's got to be a way to head this off at the pass so you don't wait until you get to the editing room. You fix some of this in the script. There's got to be a way to measure that script and manage that script so it's telling you a whole lot more than, because we thought we were golden. I had the greatest director in the world, and here we are in the editing room, panicked. you know. And I said,
Wow.
especially because indie filmmakers don't have the money to bring back, Winona Ryder and
Gary
Gary and all
Oldman,
and
Keanu,
Steph
and
and everything. They don't have that kind of money. They're in the editor room going, we're fucked.
right.
So this is where the Hart chart came from. I'll just give you an example of we didn't shoot any new scenes. We shot pieces. We realized that we had never seen Dracula and Mina together, his wife together, before he went to battle. So when she hands him the helmet, and he goes off to battle, the ending was the big controversy because the ending didn't work. The ending, she stabs him and plunges the knife into him, and she's redeemed, and he dies at peace, and he's redeemed. And then she walks out the door and walks into the arms of Keanu Reeves. And the audience was like booing.
No.
And I kept saying to Francis, that's not who they want to see. They want to see Winona and Gary stay together somehow.
Forever.
Yeah, forever. So he had George Lucas and Mike Minghella, Hellboy, watch the film to see. Yeah, we'd done a cut. We spruced it up, and we told them where we were going to fill in these blanks and that sort of thing. We got to the ending, and George said, "You broke your rules. You don't have the right ending. She has to cut off his head, which is the rules you set up in the film to totally redeem him. She's got to complete the mission, and then not walk out the door into Keanu Reeves' arms." So I remember Francis calling me, and he said, "Okay, George saw the film, and he thinks that we got to do this." And he said, "Do you think we can? You think Winona would, come back and work with Gary if she cut off his head?" And I said, "I think that's the only way you'll get her back."
Because if I don't mean to step.
Legendary, not getting along,
Yeah, they had a rough time on that set, from what I heard. Legendary.
Yeah. So we came back and put that chapel scene back up together. He had built all those sets like theater sets, so he could just fold them out. It was incredible.
Wow.
Save the gargoyles. So in that last scene where you see all of that seamless work, some of the close-ups and some of the wide shots are shot a year apart, and you're seamless. But they had to do wigs, they had to do all this stuff, and she cuts off his head, and then Roman came up with the idea of the beautiful mosaic in the ceiling of them together, flying together. But I kept saying there has to be a way to, in the screenplay form, while you're doing the script, to measure these emotional journeys your characters are going on and head some of this off at the path. We should have caught the fact that she had to cut off his head. We'd followed the emotional journey of what Carrie always had to do to Sadie by cutting off her head and taking out her heart. If I'd have been measuring that emotional journey instead of just, it'd been a great scene. So he said, "Well, why don't you start with these 3 questions?" And he gave me 3 journalist questions, which was the beginning of the Hart chart. And the questions were very simple. And I figured, he said, just answer those 3 questions before you start anything again, before you start a story. And so I started using the questions, and then I expanded them to 10 questions, and I started drawing these charts, these actual hand-drawing charts to measure the heartbeat and the emotional journey of the characters. Not an outline, not cards on the wall, because even cards on the wall, I get lost.
Mm-hmm.
Where am I emotionally? Where am I pace-wise? How important is this? So the chart was like your EKG when you get your heartbeat. Mm-hmm. Those of you who are old enough to do that. And I saw. So we started out by drawing them. That's the Austin Film Festival, one of the very early charts.
Yeah, I see it.
And then in 2015, Guy Goldstein came to me, who did Writer's Duet, and he said, "I can do an app." So now we're an online app.
Right.
That is the Dracula chart, the very first chart I ever did.
Okay.
And there's the drawn one. So, and I started doing it at the Austin Film Festival every year, but doing my films. And then people said, "Well, you wrote those films. You did that on purpose." And I went, So we started doing other people's films. So I've done Jordan Peele, Get Out. I've done Jamie Cazale's La La Land, Bo Burnham, 8th Grade, the Wedding Crashers, Batman. I mean, suddenly you start applying these principles to it. And if you just follow this, you'll never face a blank page. You'll never be writer's block. I don't believe in writer's block.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter just said it yesterday on her podcast. She doesn't believe in writer's block either. That there are ways, if you know craft, you're always jump-starting, you're always writing and answering questions and solving problems. So the Hart chart this is my booklet.
Mm-hmm.
It used to just be printed up and given away. That's how thick it is. How thick is Robert McKee's book?
A bit thicker.
And how much dust is it collecting on your shelf?
A lot.
Yeah. Chris Vogler has the only book that's as thick as McKee that should be used. Now, listen, McKee did a lot for the screenwriting trade.
Sure.
You know, this is all you need, and it says right there, never face a blank page again. There's some shitty ones, you know, but you won't be blank. So they finally begged me to put this together at Austin, and we just started it about 3 or 4 years ago, and it's caught on. And the chart you saw, is now available online. And it's an opt-in, opt-out. It's a monthly subscription, and it saves everything in the cloud. Every conversion you make, every change you make, if you go to the website, you can see the examples and you can see it come to life. I needed it because it showed me an emotional journey, what was pulling my characters through the narrative instead of being pushed. And that's what I'd been doing up until Dracula.
You'd been pushing.
I pushed everything. And even Hook, I learned a lot on Hook of finding character. If you do this, you will be writing character-driven narratives as opposed to plot-driven. It's even now being used by some showrunners in TV where they can take the chart and do a whole season. You know, it really lets you see on one page the emotional journey your characters go through instead of an outline. You know, now there's a lot of work you do before that. I mean, there's a lot of writing you do before you put it on the chart. But those 3 questions that Francis gave me is where this all started. I went, oh my God. And people go, oh, that's easy. You know, what does my character want? What do they need? What are they afraid of? What is their visible, tangible goal? Is it a satisfying ending? Because the biggest one for me is, do you have a satisfying ending? Not happy, not sad, not good or bad, but have you satisfied your audience with the journey you've taken them on? And I know everybody's got plenty of movies and TV series where they didn't like the ending of the series, or didn't like the end of the season, or they didn't like the end of the, like Lost.
So Lost is a bad... Well, a good example of a movie a show that had a horrible ending that people hated was Lost. But a great one I feel is Breaking Bad. Like Breaking Bad's ending was totally perfect and satisfying, totally and like Vince did a perfect job. And that was that was a lot of weight to carry because he was so good. Almost every episode of that series was amazing, and it just kind of kept growing and growing. Yeah. And if he missed the landing, the whole thing comes crashing.
It's like Sopranos. The last episode of The Sopranos, you know. Mm-hmm. People or the last episode of Game of Thrones, people pulling their hair out. So these are all things that I think you can. Vogler and I both agree on this. There are certain storytelling principles in the ether of the universe you can't fuck with.
Yeah, you
can try, and they're going to get you.
Right.
Or you can learn to manage them and use them to your benefit. Like structure for me is not a formula. Structure for me is lightning in a bottle. It actually liberates you if you know structure. So my whole thing is about structure and about character-driven narratives. It's the only way I've survived. It's not one of those things where I'm a working writer. I use this every single day in my craft. I'm adapting a book right now for Scott Wynant. That's how I adapt. I actually do notes. And I'm using this. I use these principles, these questions, these signposts in every single thing I do. And you'll see some quotes from some pretty big writers that didn't want to know about it until they saw what I did with the chart. And they went, "Oh my God, you know more about the movie than I do." And I directed or I wrote it. And it's great for threshold writers. It's a lot of writers that are struggling to try to figure out how do I get to be that. Mm-hmm. I've seen them stop in the middle of my sessions and go and solve a problem and come back and say, I just solved it. I know what I'm missing. And I want it to be mechanical, not some, spiritual guided talent that you can only have if you're special. You know,
Right.
that there really is a mechanical process to what we do.